Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Greenburgh Celebrates the Visual Arts. I'm actually the substitute interviewer today because Miriam Bernery is on leave. But it is my pleasure today to have with me Leila Dorne. Now, this is not the first time that Leila has exhibited at Town Hall, but this is the first time we've gotten an interview that will allow us behind the stage of what she paints. Hi, Leila. Welcome to Greenburgh
Thank you,
again.
Sarah. I'm so happy to be here.
This because you've been doing this whole thing with, I call it social art.
Social justice art,
Social
right.
justice art for a long time. Your first exhibit here was after the George Floyd murder.
Correct.
And you brought in an exhibit. Now, your exhibit now is so timely. I said to you, you were prescient because we had no idea that the world was, well, America was moving into a food insecurity issue. And the fact that you and I planned this exhibit 3 months ago.
Right.
And mounted it before what's currently happened in Congress. Tell me why you choose to do social justice initiatives in painting.
Well, I do what I can do. I can't afford to give big contributions to any cause, and I can no longer physically help and work at food kitchens and things. So it's my job, my ability to make people aware of what's going on through my pictures.
Okay. Your exhibit now is called Hunger.
Hungry.
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 Hungry. And you've situated a series of paintings that are divided into two categories. One is in Seattle, Washington, and one is in Portchester,
New York.
Now let me start with the Seattle one. Why Seattle?
I have family who lives in Seattle, and my family lives in a very upscale neighborhood called Ballard. My son introduced me to the woman in charge of something called the Ballard Food Bank. If you walked around Ballard, you would think only really privileged people live here. There can't be food insecurity here. Well, it turns out that's not true. Food insecurity is everywhere. And the Ballard Food Bank services the community not just with food, but with all kinds of other services, with veterinary services and medical and help with apartments and whatever they need, mail services for people who don't have a mailing address.
Wow. And why did you choose Portchester for the one in New York?
Well, I live near Portchester.
Okay.
So I've been in Portchester a lot, and it's a very mixed community. It is somewhat known in Westchester for its fine restaurants, but there are all kinds of people who can't avail themselves of that and in fact can't even buy their own food. So Portchester, I really wanted to show how different communities deal with the issue of food insecurity. So Portchester is very hands-on. They have the blue truck that travels throughout the community, and it's advertised where it's going to be, what day and what time, and the residents can come and take what they need.
What do they have on the food truck? Meals or
fresh food?
Fresh
food. Fruits, vegetables, bread, donated both by individuals and by local merchants.
You're right on top of things. Again, it was shocking when all of this broke, and I realized we've got an exhibit up that speaks to this kind of thing.
But it has taken me 3 years to paint these 9 pictures because I paint slowly and with great deliberation. So I didn't know 3 years ago how timely it was going to be. And when you and I planned this 3 or 4 months ago, we didn't know how timely it was going to be, as you said.
And I noticed that you use a lot of, while there are illustrations, there are also words. You use words a lot in your work.
Because even before my social justice painting period, I have always called my art literary art. So it's the kiss of death because many people just want to look at pretty pictures and don't want to stop and read them. But my work requires that you stop and read. So I use all kinds of sources. In some of my earlier work, I used my original prose or poetry, but here in this series, I've used a lot of news articles. I've used a lot of biblical quotations because it must say 1,000 times in the Bible, whichever one you subscribe to, that it's our job to feed the poor and not to let the widows and the orphans and the strangers go hungry. So I don't know where we've gone wrong.
Well, you are certainly, you've tapped into a need. And I think that artists are actually the leaders in so much of what goes on. You said you had no idea about this, but I think that artists have a tie-in to the universe, and the universe speaks to them to send messages to the rest of the world that would never receive them.
Well, the thing is that once you see that there's food insecurity, you can't unsee it. So now it's always there with me. So I've just yesterday finished another picture in the Hungry series, because believe it or not, Hungry goes on. And it's called Hungry at School Number 1, because I was. And it's at the Purchase College food distribution site for students who are needy. And there are a whole lot of college students who are needy.
Wow.
They're not all privileged.
Lee, tell me something about your background. You didn't just 5 years ago start painting. Tell me about your background.
So I worked for about 30 years as a public school teacher teaching science. And I'm told that means both sides of my brain work, which is a good thing to know. For a lot of that time, I wrote. I could never compete with you, but I wrote prose and I wrote poetry. And while I was teaching, I started to paint, I don't know when, maybe 20 years ago, but I didn't have time. You know, I didn't have time. So I retired actually about 18 years ago and began to paint full time. And the rest is history, I guess.
Have you had any formal training?
Oh, no. It would be very nice if it were true that that makes me a primitive artist.
No,
that
you're
would
not.
be a real compliment. I'm just untrained.
Well, you know, Picasso said every painter wants to go back to when they were a child and didn't care about anybody's opinion and paint like that. And I think that there is a freedom, a non-judgmental freedom that you have. I think that's what allows you to pick an idea and visualize it. Do you ever take pictures of things and paint from the pictures, or are you
I only do that. I only do that because I'm untrained. I could not go home and paint pretty Sarah sitting opposite me unless I had a photograph of you. I only paint from my own photographs.
Okay. So you're a photographer too?
Well, so to speak. It's a good thing I don't have to make any money doing this. That's the freedom of it, is that I'm doing this in retirement.
Okay.
If I had to support myself, I would be living not well if I were selling these.
Okay. I noticed that you, in the sheet that we put out with your background and to make people aware of what the meaning was of your exhibit, you dedicated this to your son, John.
My son, John, passed away a couple of months ago after a very brave battle with lung cancer for 6 years. And he encouraged me so much. Again, his literary talent is not how he made his money, but he was a gifted writer. And when I would complain to him that it's great that I'm doing all this art that's supposed to influence people, but nobody is seeing it. How can it influence people if it's all in my home? He said, Mom, you've got to keep painting and you've got to keep putting it out there. And in fact, it was he who introduced me to the Ballard Food Bank and that whole series of pictures there.
Wow. So you've been influenced by your child to do this thing that affects the world. So in essence, he has left this behind. He's given you a gift. It's really, I'm always pleased when artists come in here and they either bring their children with them. They're not kids, they're like in their 20s and 30s, and they come in and help hang the show, and they come and carry things back and forth. And I had one young man say, my mother spent her life pouring into me. I am so happy to have a chance to encourage her to pour into herself.
Isn't that lovely?
It's a wonderful thing to see this, and I think that so many artists have that as a background, because art's a very lonely thing to do. And that's why they're
Yes.
so anxious to exhibit, which is why it is my privilege to take people. You're not, I don't think I did your first exhibit. You've been winning things. You've been exhibiting lots of places, but I get people who've never exhibited before and they have
Right.
no idea. You came in wired, everything was
It's
done,
me, wired.
laid out. No, the
Yeah.
pictures were wired. And I get people who bring pictures to me that aren't ready to be hung. And I consider it my job to help them get an
Right.
exhibit together. You had things laid out. That's why I said,
Right.
well, haven't you been trained somewhere? No, there
No.
is a natural aspect to what you do.
Well, a few months ago, I told my son an old German expression, die Eier lernen die Henner, which means that the eggs teach the chickens their mothers. And I told him all of the things that he has taught me. So he studied literature and philosophy, and he introduced me, believe it or not, to the poetry form of the villanelle. With all my fancy education and all my fancy Ivy League degrees, nobody had ever introduced me to Dylan Thomas and the villanelle. And so he taught me, of course, do not go gentle into that good night. And he did that before he became ill. And all of these 6 years that he's been fighting to be still with his family, his wife and his young children, and even his mother, all I could think of was that Dylan Thomas, who didn't know him, wrote that for him. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
Well, I like to tell people that you can either go quietly into the grave, or you can go trying to use up all of the talent and skills and abilities that you have, so you go in empty. There's nothing left. And I think that you are a real example. I've been talking to artists lately who are in retirement doing wonderful things in art. And I think that that's what keeps you so vibrant.
Thank you.
I think that people think you retire. You don't retire from life, you retire from a job.
Correct.
And to be able to do something that you love is so inspirational to so many people.
Well, someone was in my attic where I keep my new canvases, and she said to me, how are you ever going to paint all these canvases? And I said, it's my goal to die painting the last one.
Exactly. It's like people say they have more books than they can read, and I go, that's okay.
Right.
I'm going to read as many as I can read until I can't read anymore.
Right. Now, some people say they want to die with one good bottle left in their wine cellar, but for me, it's one good canvas left in the attic.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our audience? You've been so forthright and interesting.
Well, thank you. I'm just so pleased that the town of Greenburgh funds a program in arts and culture and allows this exposure, because as I said, what good is it if I'm painting this to influence people and you have to come into my dining room to see it?
Well, this exhibit has been so well received, and because it's so timely, that we are extending it through November into December. So if you get a chance to come by Greenburgh Town Hall or make a special effort to come by Greenburgh Town Hall, you can do two things. You can contribute to the collection of food and non-perishable goods that are still unexpired, and leave them at Town Hall and come and visit the exhibit in all of our, we have two exhibits in our first floor galleries, and one of them is Lee's exhibit, so you'll get to see it. But I think that so many people today have begun food banks. Every town is having it. In the building where I live, they're having a day where they're collecting for a local food bank, and it gives people a chance to help. And I think that, again, there is always more than enough. It's just that it's hoarded by certain
Correct.
parts of
Correct.
people.
And that was one of the quotes on one of the Ballard Food Bank pictures, that there really is enough for everybody if we only work at it.
If we share.
Yeah.
Well, I can't think of anything else I'd like to ask you. And
Oh, I just want to thank you so much for having people see them. It was a great moment in my life when I was here the other day, and somebody, I don't know who, an employee of the town hall said to me, are you the artist? And I said, yes, and she needed to shake my hand. And it just warmed my heart.
Well, it's a two-way street. I'm really glad you got to see her. Normally, I get people telling me how wonderful the exhibit is, whatever we put up. And I say, I wish I had one of those, the light sensitive things that come on sensors.
Yes.
I want to censor that. When people start talking about the exhibit, a recording comes on and records it so that I can share it with the artists.
That would be great, because artists have weak egos because we don't get all that much positive feedback.
Yes. Well, thank you, Lee, for exhibiting. Thank you for extending the exhibit. And may you keep painting until you don't have any canvases left.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for joining us today in this conversation with Leila Dorne. And I hope that you will visit this exhibit and maybe leave a note for her and tell her how you enjoyed what she's done.
That
Thank you.
would be great.